Some people say it's fine. Some people say it's not. Okay. People are saying let's start. Okay. What do people want to discuss? What is on your mind? I don't come to these things with an agenda because I have no agenda. So I'm literally here for you. What can I help you with? Advice for making new friends. Be the kind of person that people want to be friends with. What written media do you pay for? Strategery. Ben Thompson's Strategery. Have I read the book, The Four Agreements? Yes, I have. It was okay. It was a little fluffy for me, but I liked it. I've recommended that in The Fifth Agreement in the past. Who are the three people you most admire in Silicon Valley? I don't want to pick just three. There's lots of great people in Silicon Valley. It's a magnet for creators and doers. Howard Schultz not getting a good reception for president. Yes, well, the time of elites is over. Donald Trump only won because he's essentially a populist/nationalist, even though he is, of course, an elite by birth and profession and career and status. He is not one by representation. How to break the San Francisco startup ecosystem. That's a good one. You know, I think actually one of the biggest problems that kind of humanity faces today, or I shouldn't say problem, but I would say missed opportunities, is that the entire tech industry in the Western world is inordinately concentrated in San Francisco. And that's a tragedy because really technology is a set of things that doesn't quite work yet. And it's the frontier that as we invent new technology, we move the human race forward, we move productivity forward, we tame nature, we are capable of doing things we weren't capable of doing before. So it's kind of sad that there's just one geographic region in the Western world which is responsible for most of the innovation output in technology. And that has to change. And so, how do we change that? And I think the internet is going to change it. It's going to do it sort of naturally, but it's happening very slowly. The video tools, video conferencing tools are going to get better and better. Slack, things like Slack and chat has a big impact. We're going to see kind of a new generation of video conferencing tools coming up that I think are designed specifically for remote teams. I think we're also going to see a lot more remote matching, remote working tools. We're going to see websites that sort of do remote gig economy contracts. I think crypto will have a part to play here. In fact, crypto ICOs, even though they were full of scams and fraud and lots of junk, they were at least pointing to a way to do fundraising outside of Silicon Valley. So overall, I think I think that the next 20 years, breaking tech free from Silicon Valley is going to be a big deal. And I actually hope that I have some part to play in that. I think AngelList helped a little bit, especially with the talent jobs board side. And I think even with the fundraising side, but over time, I'd like to do more in that domain. I think the tech innovation and startups should be possible anywhere in the world. Of course, they'll always be easiest in Silicon Valley, but I don't think they should be restricted to Silicon Valley. Because Silicon Valley, the golden goose is there, and so the local politicians and people, also just take it for granted. And frankly, long-term capital and innovation goes where it's most welcome. Oh, great. Someone got 2 jobs via AngelList, including working at Periscope. That's great. Someone says, I'm going to talk to a billionaire soon. How can I come across as a competent engineer? If you the great thing about engineering is it's a software engineering, I assume is what you're talking about. It's a very accountable profession. You don't have to talk. You can show. You can just go create something. You can code something up and then just show them your work. And I think that right there is better than talking about it. Sales is a job where you can sell yourself in an interview, and it helps because a good salesperson should also be able to sell themselves. But a lot of good engineers are actually really bad in interviews. So for engineers, design, product-oriented jobs, it's better just to show your output. But now, specifically, if you're talking to a billionaire, assuming that this is not one of those crony capitalist billionaires, this is someone who got there by doing something great from scratch, then they're going to be a risk taker and they're going to be a high initiative person. So what they're going to look for is what Keith Rabois, who's over at Coastal Ventures, calls barrels, not bullets. He's going to look for doers. He's going to look for people who are enthusiastic, people who lean in, people who basically say that they will or will take things from scratch with founder mentality and get them done, as opposed to someone who will wait for orders. I get like a large number of unsolicited emails from people basically saying, hey, I really want to work with you. It's kind of my life stream. Unfortunately, that's not enough. First of all, I'm retired, semi-retired. I don't really work with other people that much. But even if I were going to work with somebody, it wouldn't be because of their passion, unfortunately, because passion is in high supply. What's in short supply is passion and capability. So you have to be able to demonstrate your capabilities somehow. I want to see what have you done. What have you done on your own without being paid for it, without being pushed into it? What have you done for the sheer joy of it? What have you done for the passion of it? What have you created? And that's the only way that I have to sift through the noise, because otherwise there's too much noise. And for this billionaire person, it's probably going to be even a lot worse. So it's good to stand out by showing independent initiative, founder mentality in a shortcut. What have I done? I did this Periscope. How about you? Is it possible to stop socialism in the US? I'm kind of down on that, to be honest. I think that because, the way this country used to run was that money and media sort of used to control everything, because there was a finite amount of media in shelf space, and you had to buy access in media, or you had to get in good with journalists who, frankly, like high status people. So you sort of needed their permission to get elected, especially in, things like the presidency. But now what's happened, thanks to the internet, we've got two contradictory things going on. Contradictory thing number one is that the internet is bypassing all of those old tools. So, regular news media is being bypassed, and people are going directly to social media. And then number two is crowdfunding is also bypassing sort of traditional money in politics. And ads are becoming more and more useless. So the combination of all of this means that basically the gates that used to keep the people at bay, that kept this as a republic rather than as a true democracy, are breaking down. And we're getting kind of a true democracy. And a democracy at the edges can degenerate into mob rule. So we're shifting from Republicans versus Democrats to nationalists versus socialists, both of which are very scary to me long term, because both of them are sort of a very populist, mob-driven mentality. If I had to pick one that I'm more scared of, it's definitely socialism, just because I've read enough history in the 20th century to see what that leads to. Because socialism eventually leads to the death of the American dream, and it leads to coercion, and it creates a slippery slide economically into ruin, which certainly I don't want to be around for. But I'm not that confident that anything can really be done about it. But I think what does happen is that we're moving to the age of the sovereign individual. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it, even though it's almost 20 years old. It's very prophetic. And the thesis of the sovereign individual will seem obvious now, but 20 years ago it was a little harder, which is that eventually the most intelligent, most capable people in human society will be able to earn from anywhere. And nations are going to kind of have to bid for their presence. The U.S. had a monopoly on high-quality immigrants for the last couple of decades. Because if you were Indian or Chinese, and if you wanted to, you were entrepreneurial, you believed in the American dream, you had to come to the U.S. There was no other country that was going to let you immigrate, no other country that was going to adopt you as a chosen citizen, accept you as an American, and then let you create and produce. But I think the U.S. is the bailouts. And so because of that, people now have a sense that the system is rigged, the system is unfair. And so now people are much more interested in how do we divide up the pie rather than how do we grow the pie. So, for example, the average American doesn't get benefit out of immigration anymore. They just get competition. So they don't want any more immigration. And then on the other side, you see people who are basically saying, well, the rich stole all of our money and all of our jobs. And of course, it doesn't work that way. Wealth creation is a positive sum game. It's not a zero sum game. But yeah, no, parts of it are rigged. Parts of it are unfair. I totally agree. It's not a fair. But by the way, fair doesn't exist in the world, right? If you're going to obsess over fair, you'll never get anywhere in life. You just basically have to do the best you can with the cards you're dealt. But anyway, let's put that aside for a second. The bankers definitely have stolen a lot of money through the bank bailouts. There's no question about that. And we've wasted a lot of money on wars. So the combination means that we're sort of broke. We don't have the growth that we used to. Although recently we've had 3-4% growth, so it's been looking a little bit better. But even then, people now are trying to figure out how to divide up the pie. And I think that there are 3 very dangerous trends going on. One is kind of just general xenophobia. I'm not saying open borders or let illegal immigration in, but I think there is a place for skilled, tested, high quality immigration with a pathway to citizenship. The classic kind that the U.S. has always had. Then secondly, I would say that, the second problem is, or the U.S. used to be a melting pot, or it still is, but if you listen too much to the media and you listen too much to Twitter, now it's all identity politics. It's all about how we're different rather than about how we're all the same. We're 99.9% the same with 0.001% differences, but now everybody wants to obsess about the differences. And that's the kind of stuff that leads to civil war. What made America great was that we melted into being American, that I could come here as Indian and I could end up as American. But now people are throwing away this idea of America, and that idea was really important. And then the last piece is just kind of this whole envy-driven reallocation of wealth, 1% arguments. There's macroeconomists who are really politicians, like Piketty, masquerading as data-driven scientists and Krugman, who are laying the intellectual framework and the academic framework for essentially the long, slow, slippery slide into socialism. And unfortunately, I do think that is where the country is headed. So I think smart individuals in the future will either not immigrate to the U.S. Because it's sort of more of a declining empire, or and they'll stay in their home countries, or they'll basically become global citizens. But it's good for everybody. It's good for everybody to be to realize at this point in human history that you are no longer just a citizen of your nation. Wherever you live, whoever you are, you have one foot in the internet. And the internet is the real country, right? Like, you spend half your time on the internet, half your friends are on the internet, you get your information from the internet, you get your education from the internet. In the future, you get your work from the internet. There will come a day when you roll out of bed, you get your alert on your phone with a new gig for you. You sign up for it, you get paid in crypto, you do your work in VR, you work when you want, where you want, how you want, with who you want. And then you get paid, and then you move on to the next gig, or you take a vacation for a while. And a citizen like that, a person like that, is essentially a digitally free person. Now, they're physically not free because they still have to live in a real country, and they have to have a family and a tribe and people that they love and that they associate with, and even a culture. But I think that digitally we're going to become a lot more free. Another example. Well, someone's saying, isn't that true? Isn't that bullshit about the gig economy? Well, today the gig economy is kind of a low-end gig economy. It's like driving for Uber or delivering for Postmates. But I think we're going to see a much higher-end gig economy emerge. But for that, we still need better remote work and communication tools. But I will say there's a lot of that going on right now. It's not digital slavery. It's digital freedom. To the Joshua Bowman who's looking down on everything. No, man, it's digital freedom. It's tools. Look, the internet is a tool. Tools are there for you to use or not to use. They're voluntary. Slavery is when there's a collar around your neck and someone tells you what you can and can't do. But freedom is when you can choose whether or not to use the tools. Tools are leverage. We are living, we're tool-making creatures. We're tool-making monkeys. And we're living in an age of incredible tools. The smartphone that we're all communicating with is the greatest tool ever invented. The computer, programming that thing, that's so powerful. That's so much free leverage. You should all be using it. yet. Even if you're not an engineer, you should know a little bit about code, and you should be good with computers, facile with computers, because it will give you a superpower edge in any profession that you end up in, because you'll just be better at using the greatest tool invented by humans. Books that you recommend this year? This year just started, but in the last year, I actually spent a lot of it just reading philosophy, because last year was my yoga, meditation, chill out kind of year, where I was taking a break from the brutal work schedules that I used to run. And I just found myself naturally gravitating towards a philosophy phase. Some of the more interesting characters that are discovered for those of you who are into self-examination. Anthony DeMello, who wrote a great book called Awareness. Another one was Rupert Spira. He's got a bunch of videos up on YouTube. I reread my Jed McKenna, which I'd read a long time ago, but very provocative character. Someone just said, I just started Ficciones. What's your favorite story? Ficciones is a collection of short stories by Jorge Luis Borges, who I discovered in college decades ago, and who is still my favorite literary sci-fi author of all time. He's a very unique character. Borges is definitely worth reading if you like highly dense science fiction-ish stories with lots of literary allusions and poetry and all kinds of clever prose weaved in. My favorite story of his is probably The Library of Babel, which is a classic. If you haven't read that and you like sci-fi, I highly recommend it. It's one of my two favorite short stories of all time. The other one is Understand by Ted Chiang, who's also a genius. Someone just said, I'm 21. I come from a poor family. I have an insane work ethic. Tell me how to get rich, Naval. Okay, let's do it. So, that's what I did my famous tweet storm about. It's pinned on my profile. You should go read it. Of course, every one of those tweets can be extrapolated into, an hour's worth of conversation. But that's a good starting point. You kind of want to absorb all the different pieces, and whatever you don't understand, I can always extrapolate on much more. But I would say, the first thing that this person asked about how do I get rich, they said, I'm 21 and I have an insane work ethic. It's not really work ethic that matters. Unfortunately, there are people who bust their butts 80 hours a week, 120 hours a week, whatever the insane numbers are, and they don't get rich. So it's not really about hard work, right? You can work in a restaurant, 80 hours a week, and you're not going to get rich. So it's about knowing what to do and knowing who to do it with and when to do it. So it is much more about understanding than it is purely about hard work. Yes, hard work matters and you can't skimp on it, but it has to be directed in the right way. And if you don't know yet what you should be working on, then that is the most important thing to figure out. And you probably shouldn't be grinding at a lot of hard work until you figure out what you should be working on. I would say that the most important skill to getting rich is becoming a perpetual learner. Okay, you have to know how to learn anything you want to learn. There should be no book in the library that scares you, whether it's a math book or a physics book or an electrical engineering book or a sociology book or an economics book. You should be able to take any book down off the shelf and read it. And guess what? A number of them are going to be too difficult for you. That's okay. Read them anyway. Then go back and reread them and reread them. When you're reading a book and you're not understanding a lot of what it's saying, and there's a lot of confusion in your mind about it, that confusion is similar to the pain, the burn that you get in a gym when you're working out. But this time you're building mental muscles instead of building physical muscles. So just learn how to learn and read the hard books. And the problem with just giving advice saying just read is that there's so much junk out there, right? There's as many different kinds of authors as there are people. So there are lots and lots of people who are going to write lots of junk. So this is an unfortunate thing that I find. I do have people in my life that I consider to be very well read who aren't very smart. And the reason is because even though they're very well read, they sort of read the wrong things in the wrong order. It's not even that they read the wrong things, but they read them in the wrong order. Because if you start out reading a set of things that are false, or let's just say they're not even false, they're just weakly true at best, then they form the axioms or the foundation for your worldview. And then when new things come in, you judge whether they're accurate or not based on that foundation that you've already built. So that foundation is critical. So when it comes to reading, I would make sure that your foundation is very, very high quality. And the best way to have a high quality foundation is, unfortunately, you may not love this answer, but it's to stick to science and to stick to the basics. It's better to be really great at arithmetic and geometry than to be like deep into advanced mathematics. Your foundations are very important. It's good to, like microeconomics, I would read microeconomics all day long. Micro 101, I would throw macroeconomics away because it's trash. People can't agree on it. So generally, there's only a few things you can read where people don't really disagree. Like very few people will disagree that 2 + 2 is 4, right? So that's serious knowledge. That's knowledge everybody should have. So mathematics is a place where you can rest your head. It's a solid foundation. Similarly, the hard sciences are a solid foundation. Microeconomics is a solid foundation. The moment you start wandering out of these solid foundations, you're in trouble because now you don't know what's true and what's false. So I would focus as much as I could on the solid foundations. And another way to do this is to read the originals, read the classics. If you want to learn evolution, read Charles Darwin. Don't even read Richard Dawkins, even though I think he's great. Read him later. First read Charles Darwin. You want to learn macroeconomics, first read Adam Smith. Read von Mises, read Hayek. Start with the original. Start with the philosophers of the economy. Even if you're into communist or socialist ideals, which I'm personally not, but even if you are, start by reading Karl Marx. Don't read the current interpretation of whatever someone is feeding you about how things should be done and run. So if you start with the originals, with the foundations, then you will have enough of a worldview and understanding that you won't fear any book. And then you can just learn. And if you're a perpetual learning machine, you will never be out of options on how to make money because you can always see what's coming up in society, what the value is, where the demand is, and you can learn and come up to speed. There's an old model of making money, which is that the old model of making money is like you go to school, you study for 4 years, you get your degree, and then you work in that profession for 30 years. But things change too fast now. So now you have to come up to speed in a new profession within 9 months, and it's obsolete 4 years later. But within those 3 years that you're productive in that profession, you can get very wealthy. So it's much more important that you be able to become an expert in a brand new field within 9 to 12 months than it is that you studied the right thing a long time ago. All you really care about having studied before are the foundations so that you're not scared of any book. So if you go into a library and there's a book that you cannot read and you cannot understand, then you have to dig down and say, what is the foundation required for me to learn this? And I better go brush up on those foundations. Foundations are super important. I will bet you that I'm a little older now, so my brain doesn't work as fast as it used to. But in my prime, you could have come to me and, we could have, for example, done math problems against each other. And I would have lost to you on every calculus problem. But it was a rare human being who could beat me at arithmetic. And basic arithmetic and numeracy is way more important than being able to do calculus in life. Similarly, being able to convey yourself simply using ordinary English words is far more important than being able to write poetry or having a very extensive vocabulary or knowing 7 different foreign languages. Knowing how to just be persuasive when speaking, that sales skill is far more important than being an expert digital marketer and click optimizer on the internet. So foundations are key. It's just so much better to be a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 on foundations than to try and get super deep into things. Now, you do need to be deep in something because otherwise you'll be a mile wide and an inch deep and you won't get what you want out of life. But you can only achieve mastery in 1 or 2 things. It's usually the things that you're obsessed about at that time, and you have to sink a lot of time into it almost by definition. So you can't have mastery in everything. But if you have the foundations, then you can pick what you want to have mastery in, as opposed to just wish that or just have gotten lucky that you stumbled into it at the right time in your life early on. Question is, Naval, what is your meditation routine? So we're going to talk about meditation for a moment. Meditation is a tough. So if you guys could just stop the questions for a bit, I'm just going to talk about meditations. Let's all be meditative here for a moment. Thank you. I'm going to ignore questions for a while until I'm done talking about meditation. I'm literally going to stop looking at the screen while I talk about meditation, so you can stop typing for a little while. Okay, meditation. Meditation is a very complicated thing. It's every person you talk to who meditates will give you a different almost definition, different observation, different what it's good for, different how you do it. So what I'm telling you, and some people like Kapil, who's kind of my coach guy, hates it, okay? He hates the whole concept of meditation. But I'm going to tell you my version. I'm going to tell you what I learned that worked for me. First, I'm going to back up a little bit. By the way, there's a meditation master here. We're actually all meditation masters. So my meditation is no better than yours. I'm just telling you mine. So let's think about how your mind works. Okay, when you're walking down the street, your mind is usually associating. It's in free association. So it's basically saying, oh, this woman just crossed the street with a dog. Oh, I used to have a dog just like that. Oh, when I had a dog like that, I lived in that apartment. Oh, that apartment, God, that guy overcharged me. Oh, I hated that guy. So your mind is always just free associating and connecting things around you and having sort of this uncontrollable stream of thoughts. That's like kind of like your default how your mind operates. Beyond that is contemplation. Contemplation is when you sit there and you direct your mind to one topic, to one subject. Scientists are essentially in contemplation. They're working on a specific problem. A poet, when they're like trying to figure out the right words for the poem, they're in contemplation. Sometimes an author can be in contemplation when they're plotting out the narrative for their book. Next, beyond that is concentration. Concentration is when your mind is focused on one thing. And this can be, you're surfing and you're riding a wave. You're driving a car at a high speed around a bend. It could be you're having sex with somebody. Your mind is focused on that act. So concentration is when your mind is single pointed. Most meditation techniques are concentration methods. And there are many, many meditation techniques. If you ever want to run through a bunch of them, you can pick up a book called The Book of Secrets by Osho. And I know he's gotten a bad rap popularly recently, but he was a pretty smart guy. But there's a book called The Book of Secrets by Osho. And it's actually a translation. It's a translation of an old, I believe, Sanskrit book that has something like 120 different meditations in it. And you can try each one. You can just see which one works for you. The one that works best for me is the fourth state of mind. So concentration, what you're trying to do, either with a mantra or watching your breath, is you're trying to bring your mind to what is called a single pointed state. And then once it is focused on this one object that is concentrating on, your mind is supposed to disappear. It's supposed to basically drop the mantra or drop the breath watching on its own without effort. And your mind is supposed to stop. And then you have a chance to see what you're really like underneath this anxiety-filled barrage of thoughts that you're always having. So the last thing that you're trying to get to, the last stage after association, contemplation, and concentration is meditation. Meditation is the art of doing nothing. You cannot do meditation. By definition, if you're doing something, you're not in meditation. Meditation is a state you're in when you're not doing anything, when you're not doing anything physically, when you're not doing anything mentally, when you're not doing anything consciously. You're just making no effort. You're literally being completely still, physically and mentally, inside and out. That is a state that you're trying to achieve. But there is an oxymoron, which is for true meditation, you're not even there. The thing that's trying to achieve the state of meditation cannot actually be there in full meditation. So the method that I learned was basically that you just sit there and you close your eyes, and for at least 1 hour a day, you surrender to whatever happens. You don't make any effort whatsoever. You make no effort for something. You make no effort against something. If something travels through your mind, then you let it go. If there are thoughts that are running through your mind, you let the thoughts run. What's kind of going on is that your entire life, things have been happening to you, some good, some bad, most of which you processed and resolved, but a few that stuck with you. And over time, they stuck more and more with you, and they almost became like these barnacles stuck to you. And you lost your childhood sort of your childhood sense of wonder and being present and being happy. You lost your inner happiness because you built up this personality of unresolved pain and errors and fears and desires that are glommed onto you like a bunch of barnacles. And now how do you get those barnacles off of you? How do you strip them off of you? Well, what happens in meditation is when you're sitting there and not resisting your mind, these things will start bubbling up. It's like a giant inbox of unanswered emails, tens of thousands of emails going back to your childhood. And they will come out one by one, and you will be forced to deal with them. You will be forced to resolve them. And resolving them doesn't take any work. You just observe them. But now that you're an adult, now that you have some distance in time and space from previous events, you can sort of just resolve them. You can be much more objective about how you view them. Someone just mentioned peyote. Yes, that psychedelics are a bit of a cheat code in this, although I don't recommend drugs for anybody because I think you can do it all through pure meditation. If you wanted to accelerate ahead, psychedelics are good for that. There's a good book that Michael Pollan wrote recently called How to Change Your Mind. And I think that is a brilliant book that everybody should read. In any case, so with meditation, over time, you will resolve a lot of these deep-seated unresolved things that you have in your mind, and it is different for everybody. And once they're resolved, there will come a day when you sit down in the morning to meditate, and I recommend morning 1 hour a day because anything less is not enough time to really get deep into it. But I would recommend, if you really want to try meditation, do 60 days, 1 hour a day, first thing in the morning. And if you sit there, do that, after about 60 days, you'll sort of be tired of listening to your own mind. You will have resolved a lot of your issues, or you'll have to heard them enough that you'll have kind of seen through those fears and those issues. And what'll happen is one morning, you're going to hit mental inbox zero. Okay, if you know the inbox zero concept, is when you open your email and there are no emails and it's zero email. And that is a pretty amazing feeling. Now, I don't want to describe this because it's kind of nonsense to use these descriptors for other people, but it's a state of somewhere between joy and bliss and peace. And once you have that, you don't want to give that up. If you can get a free hour of bliss every morning just by sitting and closing your eyes, that's worth its weight in gold. That will change your life. In terms of how to sit still for an hour, by the way, meditation isn't hard. All you have to do is sit there and do nothing. Just sit down, close your eyes and say, I'm just going to give myself a break for an hour. This is my hour off from life. This is the hour I'm not going to do anything. Yes, if thoughts come, thoughts will come. I'm not going to fight them. I'm not going to embrace them. I'm not going to think harder about them. I'm not going to reject them. I'm just going to sit here for an hour with my eyes closed, and I'm going to do nothing. How hard is that? Why can you not do anything for an hour? What's so hard about that? Just give yourself an hour break. That's it. The book I mentioned was Michael Pollan, Pollan. He's famous for being the New York Times, I think he was a New York Times journalist, and he wrote In Defense of Food and The Omnivore's Dilemma. And this is his most recent book. I actually don't recommend the apps. I love what the Headspace and Calm guys are doing, and I'm a big fan of them. But for what I just described, that method will not work with an app, because the app will clutter your mind with the instructions from the app. No music, no noise, no sound. Just sit in a quiet, dark place. Put your back against something. If it's the first thing in the morning, you're not going to fall back asleep, so it's okay to lean. You don't need any fancy postures or poses. You just need to sit down in such a way that you're comfortable. So put pillows underneath your knees, put big cushions underneath your butt, whatever it takes. Get super comfy, because you don't want to move for the next hour. You just want to relax completely and do nothing. All you're doing is giving yourself 1 hour off. I think the apps are great training wheels, but at some point you got to learn how to ride the bike. Someone asked, can you talk about going through and resolving those thoughts? The thoughts resolve themselves. I know that sounds hard to believe, but you just kind of have to sit there with them. That's all. The reason they don't get resolved is because you're running away from them, or because you're fighting them. If you sit there with something long enough, it will get resolved. Listen, all day long, there are things that bother us. And those things sit in front of us and annoy us until 10 minutes later, they're gone, and the next thing is bothering us. So when you sit with something long enough, it does go away. It's not like it stays there forever, but some things just take more time. But there's nothing to do other than just to let it be. Just let it come up, just watch it, let it be. How do you know you've hit inbox zero? Oh, you'll know. It's not subtle. When you hit inbox zero, then meditation arrives. And when meditation arrives, it's just a whole different beast. My drug of choice, honestly, these days is meditation. Somebody asked me what my drug of choice is. I like red wine, I won't lie. And, living in California, we've all tried cannabis here and there, but meditation is it. That's my main drug of choice. That's the one that I get high on every day. What is the noise behind you? It's a fireplace. Someone asked, does seeking inbox zero defeat the point of it? Yeah, I mean, in some very deep sense, yes. Like for true meditation, you can't have an objective. You can't be seeking anything. But I assume I'm talking to a general audience here, not to advanced practitioners. For a super advanced practitioner, you don't want to seek anything. But it is kind of contradictory. It's like, well, then why sit down and meditate in the first place? You can sound really clever by saying, there's no point to it. You're not supposed to do anything, and there's no reason to do it, nor should you seek it. But then you actually wouldn't do it. So it would defeat itself. You would defeat yourself at the starting line. Did I read 12 Rules for Life? What was my take? I started to. I couldn't get through it, to be honest. I feel like it was very basic. It was meant for perhaps a younger person who was still looking for their moral foundation in the world. Do I think you should avoid salaried work? Let me switch gears for a second. If people could stop asking questions for a moment, and let's talk about different kinds of work. Okay, let's talk about how you make money in different kinds of work. And very few of us are lucky enough to start out with anything other than salaried work. We all start with salaried work. My first job was kind of in an illegal catering company in the back of a van delivering Indian food when I was 15. That was my first organized job. I had many jobs before that. I had paper routes. I washed dishes in the cafeterias. So I've done them all. I've done all those jobs, right? So I've done salaried jobs, and you have to start with shitty salaried jobs. You got to work your way up. What helped me work my way up was I just hated these jobs. So I wanted to do something better. I wanted to do something more intellectual. So I kind of earned my way up into better and better and bigger jobs. But it was only when I got to Silicon Valley that I got, educated on the kind of the value of owning a business and getting out of a salaried job, right? And so that is super important. Like everybody should aspire to that. So let me see if I can come up with a good example, right? Like let's talk about the real estate business for a moment. It's like a very real, tangible business, right? So the worst kind of job is, you're someone who's like repairing a house. You're like a construction worker, right? So, maybe you get paid $10, $15, $20 an hour, and you have to go to people's houses, and you have to go there at a specific time. You have to show up at 8 a.m., and your boss demands that you're there, and you kind of just repair little pieces of the house, right? So here you have zero leverage because it's just whatever you're doing with your own hands. You have some accountability, but not really. Your accountability is to your boss. It's not to the ultimate client. It's not to the owner of the house. And you don't have any real specific knowledge. The things that you're doing are, bare labor that almost anybody can do. So you're just not going to get paid a lot. You're getting paid minimum wage plus a little bit for your skill and your time, and depending on where you are, and that's kind of it. The next level up might be the contractor, right? The general contractor who's working on the house for the owner. That person may be getting paid, let's call it $50,000 to do the whole thing, and then they're paying the laborer $15 an hour, and they're keeping the difference. Okay, so that's obviously a better place to be, but how do we measure that? How do we know that's better? Well, we know it's better because this person has some accountability, right? They have some accountability because they're responsible for the outcome. So they have to sweat it at night if things aren't working right. And then they also have some leverage, and they have not a great formal leverage, but they have people working for them. That's the labor. And they have a little bit more specific knowledge, and that knowledge is how to organize a team and make people show up on time and how to deal with city regulations and those kinds of things, right? Well, the next level up from that might be a developer, right? Now, a developer is someone who is going to actually go and buy a crappy house, and then they're going to hire a bunch of contractors, and they're going to build that house, and they're probably going to take out a loan to buy the house. They probably don't even have the money themselves. They go to investors, they raise the money, then they buy the shell of a bad house, they tear down that house, they rebuild it, and then they sell it. Now, a good developer could make, instead of $50,000 like the general contractor or $15 an hour like the laborer, the developer might be able to make $1 million or $500,000 in profit when they sell the house for more than they bought it for, including the expenses and the construction. But now notice what's required from the developer. Very high level of accountability, right? By the way, someone just asked me, Naval, already get taxed? Actually, no. Very simple answer to that is people like me are highly globally mobile. We leave. So what taxing capital does is it causes capital flight. Taxing entrepreneurs reduces entrepreneurs. The United States loss is somebody else's gift. So I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about the next generation who wants the American dream to stay alive. Anyway, going back to my example, the developer takes on more risk, more accountability, has more leverage, and needs to have more specific knowledge. They need to understand fundraising. They need to understand the ins and outs of city regulations. They need to understand where the real estate market is headed and whether they should take that risk on or not. So, that's a difficult one. And then the next level up from that might be someone who's running a fund on real estate. And that person has an enormous amount of capital leverage, and they're dealing with lots and lots of developers, and maybe they're buying huge amounts of houses and inventory. One level above that might be a company like Open Door that's writing code to buy inventory and carrying a massive book of houses. So you see at each level how increasing leverage, increasing accountability, increasing specific knowledge, adding in money-based leverage on top of labor-based leverage, adding in code-based leverage on top of money and labor, allows you to actually create something bigger and bigger and get closer and closer to owning all the upside and not just being paid a salary. So generally, when you're working in life, yes, you start as a salaried employee, but you essentially want to work your way up this stack that I just talked about to try and get to higher and higher leverage, accountability, and specific knowledge. And the combination of those over a long enough period of time with the magic of compound interest will make you wealthy. Can this podcast go on YouTube? The Periscope? Some people actually turn them into YouTube videos and put them on YouTube, so feel free to do that. I don't have the time or the inclination. How do you work your way up? I mean, I hate to say it, but you just do really good work for a long time, and it is thankless until people recognize you. It's the nature of these things that nobody recognizes you for a long time, and then everybody recognizes you all at once. Like all the opportunities hit you at once. Someone mentioned Joe Rogan's podcast. Yeah, I mean, I would do Joe Rogan's podcast, but at this point, he reached out to me, and then I sent him a bunch of links, and then he went dark. So I assume I'm just low on his priority list because first of all, I'm not hustling to get the Joe Rogan podcast. It doesn't matter that much to me. It's only because my cousin wants me on there and he reached out. So now my ego is a little bit like, well, why doesn't he want me now on the Joe Rogan podcast? But the reality is, I could care less. I'm here talking to the people who want to listen. I'll have my own little media empire if I want it. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. I could just start tweeting again. I cut down on my tweeting heavily, but I could just start tweeting heavily again. I could do a couple of blog posts. I have a book in me. I have another huge tweet storm that I've been putting together. So I have no doubt that it could get all the reach that I want. Why share that with Joe Rogan? Why not just build it under my own media brand? What is interesting about these podcasts, though, is that it's conversational. It gives you someone else to talk to. it would be nice to have someone else intelligent and wide-ranging to talk to. So there's obviously value in that. I think one problem with me going to the Rogan podcast is that when someone like a Joe Rogan advertises his podcast, it's for like a specific thing. Like someone like Elon Musk, but someone else will say, oh, this is a professor of psychology who's studying blah, blah, blah. This is a person who's really into nutrition. This is like an MMA champion, right? So people have these very precise, very specific brands. And I don't have a precise, specific brand. I don't want a precise, specific brand. I'm a human like the rest of you. I want to be able to think about anything and talk about anything. And thinker is a shitty brand because everyone's a thinker. So it's just like another guy with opinions. So I can understand why Joe Rogan doesn't care about me on the podcast, because he doesn't even know what to talk about with me. I don't even know what to talk about with me. My thoughts on why California is able to charge such a high tax rate. Well, interesting thing to note about California is California has a monopoly on all of the warm and dry coastline in the United States, which is the largest, richest country in the world. So that right there gives it enormous built-in natural resources. And before people start running around saying Florida, I said warm and dry. Show me warm, dry coastline in the United States. It's all in California, 100%. It's like, why is Saudi Arabia's government so messed up, but they still managed to get by? Because they're sitting on all this oil. Why did Venezuela manage to survive for this long being this messed up? Because it's got the largest oil reserves in the world. Natural resources, right? So the same natural resource powers California, except in California's case, a warm, dry coastline. And if you look at the politics of California, the politics of California basically boil down to the residents of California all saying, we got here first, newcomers stay out. So all the policies are designed to keep new people out, but everybody wants to go there because of the warm and dry coastline. And there's no need to create a tweet campaign to get me on Rogan. I don't want to harass him. First, I think it'll backfire. Because if I were him and someone's fans started like tweeting at me all the time incessantly, I would just get annoyed. So I think it would just backfire. I think I'll get on Rogan when I no longer get any value out of being on Rogan. I've kind of found that's how the universe works. So the day that I am truly indifferent about being on Rogan, and I'm like, it's like a 50-50, that's when he'll call. I'm pretty sure of that. I've just seen that that's just how the universe works over and over. And I can't prove it, but it's just a hunch. How do you regulate media consumption so it does not consume you? It's a great question, and I struggle with it. One of the big problems that I have right now that I'm facing is I have a serious Twitter addiction. I only broke it for 2 weeks in July when I disappeared off Twitter. But other than that, I have a serious Twitter addiction, and it's definitely costing me. I think I spend more time these days tweeting about reading than actually reading real books. And that's because I'm just really into Twitter. That's it. I've actually unfollowed a lot of the people I used to follow on Twitter. I've unfollowed a lot of tech industry Twitter. I've unfollowed a lot of crypto Twitter. I've unfollowed a lot of definitely outrage Twitter, political Twitter. And I've even unfollowed people who are smart and thoughtful, but just have too much noise in their feeds. So my Twitter people that I follow, even like the 500 or something Twitter accounts I follow, a good number of them are muted. And many of them have their retweets turned off. So I am trying to focus on following either science or philosophy or nutrition or something that has value to me in my life. I tend to unfollow people who get outraged, who get emotional, who get triggered. And then a lot of people who reply to me in my comments, honestly, I block a lot of people. These days I block at the drop of a hat. I'm not like Nassim Taleb, but I'm probably blocking 2 or 3 people a day. If someone says something stupid, like outrageously stupid or insulting, then I just block them. I mute a lot of people. People say something dumb, but it was not ill intention, but it was just like very low quality and sort of just waste of time. I mute them. And this actually allows me to go through all my mentions, but I probably squander 30 minutes a day going through all my mentions. And that's a lot of time. I do need to learn how to back off of Twitter more. I need to get back more into books. It is a problem that I'm facing as well. Humans are not designed to have the entire world's news thrown at them all the time. Even as a bookworm, I'm not meant to live inside the Library of Alexandria. It's too much. So one has to, it's another one of those modern struggles, right? We all have to learn how to get over video games. We have to learn how to get over, TV. Luckily, that's one that I kicked a decade ago. I haven't watched a TV show in a year. Even then, it was just Game of Thrones with my wife and Rick and Morty, of course. That's the exception because it's so intelligent. But I don't watch movies and haven't for a long time. Video games, I go in and out, but mostly out. It's very rare that I play a video game these days. Only socially with friends and never alone. Twitter is a big remaining addiction. It's hard. We live in a culture of massive abundance. Someone said, I would love to see a conversation between Kapil Gupta and Sadhguru. I've actually met both of them, and I don't think they would get along. They're very, very different people. Someone asked about weed, cannabis. It's hard. If you're addicted to cannabis, and you want to get off of it, then I would suggest getting off of it, because I think like cannabis is probably the most harmless of the drugs out there, and it can help lessen anxiety, and there are some good medical benefits, but it's not a free lunch. There's no free lunches in life. With cannabis, I remember researching it a little bit a while back, and if you find any old paper on cannabis, old scientific paper, and we're talking 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they're all incredibly negative. Like, it's the worst drug ever invented, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to the 90s and the 2000s, and they're kind of positive. And after 2000, they're all incredibly positive. No one can say anything negative about cannabis. But cannabis is sort of this, the cannabis that is being sold today, at least in the states where it's legal, is not the cannabis that, you might have grown up on. This is not 3, 4, 5% THC, it's 25% THC. So it can be, the unintended consequences of this stuff, I don't think we quite know yet. At the very least, I guarantee you that if you're a regular cannabis smoker, it will rob you of your motivation. You're just too happy. Life is just too easy. If I had discovered cannabis when I was 16, I probably would not have had a good wealth or career outcome. And I may not have gotten some of the other things that I want in life. Exactly. Someone said, why do you think they call it dope? Yeah, it's dope because it makes you dopey. So you kind of do want to get off of it. And I actually think meditation is a great way to get off of it. Once you get to a good place in meditation, it's better than what you get out of cannabis, and without many of the downsides. So that is the way that I would use to get out, but it's not easy. It'll take you, like I said, at least 60 hours of an hour a day every morning. That's the minimum. What is the purpose of life, Naval? Everyone has to have their own answer to this question. So my answer is not necessarily correct. It's just valid for me. It's not valid for you. So what's interesting is more to explore the question than to try and come up with an answer to the question. Kapil Gupta and I've talked quite a bit about this, and the conclusion that I've sort of come to for myself is, I'm not answering your question directly, I'm answering a little indirectly, is when I try to think about what I want to do these days with my life, and I'll be the first to admit that I have a luxury that the rest of you don't, or many of you don't, which is I have money. So I have a lot more options open to me. But I like to think that I would have still thought this way even if I didn't have money, which is, when I think about what I should do with my life, I kind of realize that none of it is going to matter in the end. In fact, one good mental construct, if everyone could stop with the questions for a sec, one good mental construct is that I think that everything I do in my life is going to be a failure. Everything I do is going to be a failure. And I'm being deliberately provocative because I'm trying to catch your attention to deeply think about this. The reason everything I do is going to be a failure is, one is on the material level, on the physical level, I'm going to die. And when I die, I won't care. I've been under general anesthesia. There was life before, what was life like before I was born? I just didn't care. In those situations, you don't care. So when you die, you don't care about anything anymore. So in that sense, everything you've accomplished, you don't take anything with you. It's a failure. There's a second sense in which it's all guaranteed to fail, which is even if you believe in ideas and memes and progeny and legacy, well, eventually the Earth will fade away. And after that, the solar system will fade away. And after that, the galaxy will fade away. And then the universe will end. So nothing is forever. Nothing is permanent. So everything goes to zero eventually. So there's that sense of failure. And there's a third way of realizing that everything